Hello and welcome back to the Organ Makers channel. Today we're going to make an étagère, which is a fancy word for open bookcase. There's the SketchUp drawing, and we're going to start like we did with the mid-century modern tables by finishing first. So the customer I'm building this for saw that video of the mid-century modern tables and contacted me to build this for her. She liked the exposed plywood and she liked the color of the finish and everything. So I designed it up for her and we made one little alteration and away we go. So breaking down the plywood, sanding it, and we're going to apply the stain to it before we cut it into the individual shelves. So I'm going to use the Denatured Alcohol to kind of clean off the sanding dust. I use that instead of a tack cloth because I don't like tack cloths, they're too sticky. I'm going to use this pre-stain on the plywood. This is oak veneer plywood. And this kind of helps the stain penetrate a little bit better. I really like it. Then we're just going to let it dry for an hour. Hour to 2 hours is what the can says between the pre-stain and the actual stain. So here we go with the charcoal stain. Put it on relatively heavy. And kind of smooth everything out. And then kind of rubbing it in, wiping it off. I want it to be pretty solid color here. A little, I mean, definitely the grain coming through, but not a lot of the blonde coming through. And we'll let that bake for an hour. Okay, everything's kind of cured. I'm breaking it down with my track saw into the squares, and I realized I probably should have done this on the table saw, but my brain wasn't thinking that way. So I'm going to put an edge on it, just kind of ease the edge, not round it over, like the mid-century modern tables, which I'll put a link below and in the video here for that. Kind of want a pillowed edge, not a round over edge. So I made a little adjustment to the router to give it a little bit deeper. And then I'll show you the edge here. So just kind of easing the edge off. It gives a nice clean line to the blue, to the blonde. And in the mid-century modern, I didn't really show this part, but I took a 1.5" Forstner bit through a 2x4 and cut that down the middle, and that's what I'm using to sand the edges to kind of give me a nice clean line and follow that contour. And then there's it all finished up. Looks pretty. It'll look better with the finish on it because it will really contrast it and yellow out the sides there. You can kind of see putting the poly on and then wiping it off. So now I'm going to attach the supports using dowels. So I'm drilling through holes in 3 of the shelves and a halfway through hole in the top shelf. Set up this little jig, made sure it matched perfectly in both directions. So now we're going to make the legs. I started with 5/4 oak I got from my hardwood vendor, milled it down to be square or 1 inch, and then truing up one edge. I cut them in half just to make them a little easier to work with on the joiner. And then we'll rip this to 1 inch and 1/32 strip. And you see me making a little mark there when it comes off the saw. I'm marking the face that the blade touched. And then I'll just sweeten up that cut on my cutoff to run up against the fence again. And then there's the third leg. And I knew I could get another leg out of it, so I'm saving my bigger scrap there. And the fourth leg. So now these are all just a little fat, and I'm going to make a pass on that cut edge on the joiner just to kind of sweeten it up. I don't know if my table saw needs a better blade or if it's out of adjustment a little bit, but the cuts coming off of it are not perfect. You still see saw marks, so that's why I always join it. And maybe that's true if the blade is set up just like a jointed edge. So sand. Sanding with staining works better. If I'm going to do an oil finish, I usually just leave it off the planer and off the joiner. Kind of like that feel of it. But the stain takes better when it's sanded. So I'm going to stain two faces and let it kind of set up. Then I'll wipe the stain off and then stain the other two faces. That one I only did once. I'll catch it here in a second. This is one of the reasons why I never close the lid on the stain until I'm done. Because my brain doesn't always work very well. And I just gave that one another coat because it was just coming up a little too wood grainy. I wanted it to be more opaque. And I'm going to lean these up against the wall, let them dry. So now I'm cutting them down. So each post is going to be cut from the same piece of wood. You can see I have an A marked on that one. And I'm keeping the grain orientation the same. So when you look at the piece, it will all line up. And I'm cutting the last pieces here of the feet. And here I'm going to lay it out for you. That's how they're going to go. So with one of the cutoffs, I found the center and I'm drilling a 1/2 inch hole through. And I'm going to use this as kind of a doweling jig. So I set up a little assembly kind of factory on my work table, just popping the pieces in there and clamping them down. And I've got blue tape on my drill bit for a depth stop, just to get all the holes uniform in depth and in location. And I'm also making sure that I'm drilling them with my little indicator mark I have on them all in the same location. Now applying the top coat to all the leg pieces, and I set up this little piece of plywood with a hand screw clamp just to lean them up against while they dry, so they're only touching in the corners. I thought it was pretty clever. I'm just hitting the bottoms of the feet one more time because the end grain soaks it up. So I got an oak dowel at the hardwood store. If you buy dowels from the box stores, they're not always the right dimension. So these are exactly a ½ inch round. And I'm using a hand tool, so everybody drink. Just taking the edges off. So it's always nice to have a friend help you with glue ups. So Bailey's come down to the shop and it's gonna keep me moving here. So we're using wood glue for the dowels, and I've kind of roughed up the spots where the on the shelves where the supports are going to go, but we're also using CA glue, so because I know that's going to bond with the finish. I didn't know how well the wood glue would bond, and we have one that's giving us a little bit of a fight, so we get a bigger clamp. Just kind of clamping in layers as we go, making sure that the legs are square. And then we got a little too tall for ourselves, so I went and got some step stools, and I didn't even think to move the camera. But you'll see what it looks like here in a second. Okay, I got all the clamps on. And we will let this set up. Here we go, here's the top. Actually, I built it upside down, so it's the bottom. And you can see the dowels sticking out, and those will accept the feet here that you'll see in a second. And again, wood glue and CA glue. Make sure they're square. And you can see me spray the activator on for the CA glue. It smells really good. It smells like cherries. I like that brand. And there we go. I like when your glue up is the final stage and it's not 4 more hours of sanding. Camera's doing a little distortion on this, but I assure you everything's level, square, and plumb. Sits perfectly flat on the table. And that's how we made it.